asking you to reflect on this presentation and to think about this presentation. I won't give you any definition of what farmer-led research is, for example, because I want you to hear to our speakers and to look from the context that they are right now, what they are doing, how they are working. But the most important aspect to consider is that farmer-led research is a service that belongs and is managed by farmers in rural communities. And it, in some ways, highlights farmers' experimentation and innovation and brings up their capacity to disseminate their own experiences, promote documentation of innovation processes and products, and foster linkages and build multi-stakeholder partnerships through which farmers' innovations could be recognized. Consequently, farmer-led research influences policy through dialogue and integration of approaches into formal institutions of agricultural research and development. In farmer-led research, what I learned through my years of experience is that they seek practical solutions and may focus use of lessons learned from experience, as well as their knowledge of active ingredients found in their own natural resources. By saying that, I would like also to highlight the definition that Ecological Farmer Association of Ontario provides for farmer-led research. It is in the Canadian context. They consider farmer-led research programs to help to support farmers combine their curiosity with scientific rigor to answer their most challenging on-farm questions. Next slide, please. And from these definitions, we want to highlight the importance of farmer-led research, especially for us who are in the Canadian context, who collaborate with international farmers and rural communities around the world. Why it is important for us? Well, the most important for us is that when we work with farmers, we are collaborators. We learn from each other, and we are continuously searching for new and better ways of doing things. Farmers' research and innovations are practical that can be applied in research, and they address real issues under their own perspectives, considering their own context and their natural resources. That this affect in some ways personally and may be useful for the community at large. Recognizing and appreciating the work of such small-scale family farmers lead to the co-creation of knowledge. It is where the scientific and technological knowledge comes to the table, and it is an opportunity for indigenous, local knowledge and scientific knowledge to work together through participatory innovation development, and also called by ProLinova, the international community of practice that has been working for more than 30 years with small-scale farmers and linking science and technology with these local producers. They call it farmer-led joint research. For us in the University of Guelph, especially for our students, because in the Ontario Agricultural College, we have the benefit and we have the facility of counting with natural science and biophysical science programs, but also more interdisciplinary programs like we have in the School of Environmental Design and Rural Development. We have, I sit in the Rural Planning and Development Program, and also we have the Capacity Development and Extension Program. It is an opportunity for our students like this one, and I see the incentive and the interest that our students put in order to organize this event, because they want formal research institutions and academia to engage more directly with farmers, principally small scale farmers and farmers in small agriculture or family agriculture around the world. This is not only to promote greater and more impactful innovation. It is most important that we lead to influence through our research, influence policies, strategies, and institutions that support poverty alleviation, confront climate change and new diseases in a sustainable way. A major outcome is the move from user-driven research to co-production of knowledge and all solutions. Strong linkages between research, education, and farmers will provide and provides options to maximize the potential benefits for resilience, nutrition, and livelihood enhancement. Now, let me say from my own perspective, what would be the benefits of collaboration with farmers? Please, next slide. Well, it is an opportunity for us as researchers and academics to embed farmer research and innovations in formal agricultural research for development or agricultural research in development. It is for us in agricultural research that we can focus our work to the real needs of farmers or small-scale farmers and rural communities in Canada and around the world. And it is also a good opportunity for donors and funders, but they also must understand that the research embedded in local development processes follows a different dynamic in which the main outcomes flow from building local capacity to innovate rather than from adopting researcher-developed technology. Next slide, please. And the last slide, I want to highlight opportunities of farmer-led research. We all know that this is beneficial for farmers. This is beneficial for farmers, and it has high relevance of the research for local farmers, especially women farmers. It is giving the ownership that farmers deserve, and they are entitled in order to lead to higher motivation and engagement. It is an opportunity to learn from farmer to farmer learning and communicate the results, the research results in a more friendly manner. And for researchers, it is considering farmers as partners in research, and the power dynamics and the ethical aspects are well embedded in these activities. It is also an opportunity to out and upscale approaches and activities that we think that can be replicated and disseminated around the world. It engages farmers, mostly in participatory data collection and analysis. Why? Because we, at the same time that we get information for our research, we document information for our research, we also help building capacity or strengthening capacity for different stakeholders working with these communities. It is not only about the communities, but the different stakeholders or actors involved in this. And mostly, it also strengthens the capacity of farmers on facing new challenges and current challenges that we are seeing. It is also for rural extensionists and rural planners, because I am in that program. For us, it is a great opportunity. It is an opportunity to apply, for example, indigenous planning in our work. It is an opportunity to apply the local economic learning from the courses that we have in our program. We work in project management and development. We work with evaluation, with impact assessment. We have courses for our students in this capacity, gender planning, and international rural planning and development. I think, and And I am excited that all our work can influence policymakers, and it will allow to institutionalize research by women and men in farmers within national and subnational agricultural strategies and policies, while recognizing the importance and value of local research and innovation. It also will facilitate access to national funds for research by and with men and women farmers to support small-scale farmer research and innovation. And finally, it facilitates spaces for representation, for diversity, for inclusion of small-scale farmers in the governing bodies of research institutions. Thank you, and welcome to our group.
Thank you, Silvia. We appreciate you being with us today in this webinar. Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce you our first guest speaker, Angie Cook. Since 2008, Angie has operated Fertile Ground Farm, a diversified market garden near Waterloo, selling organic produce primarily through her CSA, Community Shared Agriculture. With dozens of crops and varieties to manage, she has become increasingly interested in tracking and comparing how they all perform. For the past few years, she has been participating in and developing variety trials integrated into her production fields. She has been a farmer researcher with the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario's Pharma-Led research program since 2016. Dear Angie, welcome, and I turn it to you.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here, and it's wonderful to see such an international audience. So I'm speaking to you from Waterloo, Ontario on my 4-acre market garden, and we're located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. So I'll be speaking both from my own perspective as a farmer researcher and also sharing some learnings and perspectives from the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario's Farmer-Led research program. You can go to the next slide. So here's my farm, and then the next slide. So my involvement with farmer-led research has been since 2016, and this is a quick summary of some of the trials that I personally have been involved with, some just here on my farm, and some have been multi-farm trials across Ontario. Next slide. So what is farmer-led research from my perspective and from the perspective of the farmer-led research program? I think essentially what I see it as is a process of inquiry where farmers apply the scientific method to address our on-farm curiosities and challenges, and to do that in ways that are compatible with our goals and our farming methods and our scale of operation and our equipment. So farmer-led research really is distinguished as research that's conducted on a working farm and has farmers' curiosities and challenges at its heart. Farmers who are involved in farmer-led research, most of us are really farmers first and researchers second. So for me, being part of the farmer-led research program of the EFAO has been super beneficial because of the way that it supports and trains us to become better researchers. And the benefit of that is that while farmers are always conducting mini trials and experiments, I think often we get to the end of them and realize maybe we didn't collect data quite the way we meant to. We don't get the results that we want. And so being part of a program helps us get the information we actually want to make our farm decisions. So we're researchers, yes, because we're curious people, but primarily because we want to be better farmers. Next slide. Right, so then you can keep going. Here we are. So the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario, just for a little bit of context, is a member-based organization that was established by farmers for farmers about 40 years ago. And it focuses on farmer-led knowledge sharing, research, and community building to help ecological farmers improve the health of our soils, our crops, our livestock, the environment, but to do that while running profitable farm businesses. So EFAO launched its Farmer-Led Research Program in 2016. It's Ontario-based. Over the past 5 years, more than 70 different farmers across the province have received funding and support to conduct over 100 trials for our farms. And what happens as a result of this is that results are shared freely with others, be they other member farmers or just anyone in the general public. And this happens at field days, it happens through workshops, it happens through research roundtables, and it happens through an annual symposium at our annual conference. So all of the farmer researchers come together and share results with each other, which is really wonderfully helpful. So this is an example of a few of the research trials and some of the areas of research that the EFAO's Farmer-Led Research Program has supported over the past few years. And the program is supported, I should say, by a staff person who's actually here, Sarah Hargreaves. You can enter in the chat, I'm sure, if you want to. And there's also an advisory committee that helps select trials for a given season and do some of the prioritization of what areas we want to make sure have been covered off on. Participating farmers have some of their costs covered for the trials that are being run and also receive a stipend. Next slide. This just gives a little bit of a sense of the annual cycle, and I won't go into too much detail here, but you can see there's really a year-round, while a lot of trials are only happening during the growing season, this cycle allows for curiosity and trial ideas to be identified in the fall and winter, to be vetted by the advisory committee, and have protocols worked out over the winter heading into spring. Data collection happens over season, and then in the fall, the statistical crunching happens and results are shared at the annual conference. And there are some trials that don't fit exactly within this cycle, but this gives a sense of what's happening. In the next slide. So some opportunities next. The Farmer-Led Research really offers farmers tools to innovate effectively and efficiently. So whether that's to adapt to climate change, to assess the ecological or economic impacts of different practices, research and the research skills help offer tools to be able to do this better. Next, there's also an opportunity to collaborate with other farmers and researchers. So, for example, multi-farm trials, which can really improve the value of results and allow farmers to work together to see how variables play out in different farming systems and different locations. Next, and it also gives farmers the confidence to share knowledge and findings with other farmers because we have confidence that what we've seen is meaningful. And there's also being part of a farmer-led research program where we're a little bit more networked together also gives the ability to disseminate findings more rapidly. So as I alluded to before, there's an annual symposium, and this has been a really great way for farms to present their findings to each other, to ask questions. But we also publish all of the reports on the EFAO website, and a lot of the trials get written up in the quarterly newsletter as well. So next, really, I think for farmers, our most trusted source is other farmers. And there's something empowering about getting this information from other farmers who are exploring their curiosity and have nothing to gain except becoming better farmers. So nobody's trying to sell us anything as a result of the research. And often that's how research kind of gets fed to farmers, is in the form of an advertising pitch. So I'm going to, if you want to queue up the video, I'll just talk for a couple of minutes while you find that. So this is just a short 3-minute video about the Farmer-Led Research Program with a bunch of different farmers talking about some of what their experience has been like. But I'll just say a few things first from my own experience. and perspective is that one of the things I've found most empowering taking part in farmer-led research is just being able to do my own research. I can find out exactly what I want to know and trust what I think I've learned. I appreciate the honing of observation skills. I notice things differently in my fields than I did before I became a researcher. The accountability of being part of a program is really helpful in prioritizing the follow through. So having an idea in the winter about something that I would love to discover is wonderful, but when it's July and it's really, really busy, it can be super hard to follow through on what I said I wanted to do. You can go ahead and play the video.
One of the great things about farming is you're always learning. You can never sort of sit back on your heels or rest on your laurels. Things are always changing. The market's dynamic, the climate's dynamic, and there's always another EFAO farmer who's tried something that can lead to something really great on the farm.
The Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario, the EFAO, is a membership organization that connects farmers so that they can learn from each other in order to improve the health of their soils, crops, livestock, and environment while running profitable farm businesses. An important part of EFAO's work is helping farmers to tackle their on-farm challenges with financial and technical support for farmer-led research.
I've always been curious about how different things that I may try will have an impact on my growing practices, and tried various things over the years. But what I found really challenging is the follow through. The season gets really busy and I often lose track of them halfway through the season. So what I really love about being part of the farmer-led research network and running trials in a more formal way on my farm is that there's accountability. I've promised that I'm going to follow through with my data, and that inspires me to make it a priority. And it also means I have more confidence in the results.
The Farmer-Led Research Project really applies that scientific rigor so that we can be sure that what we're doing is really benefiting our farm. And the experiment that we're doing requires buying these great big tarps like we have behind us. Those things are expensive. So before we go and buy $10,000 worth of that stuff, we can go through the Farmer-Led Research Project and figure out if it really is a good investment, if it's going to benefit us in the long term.
It really puts the farmer at the center of the research as opposed to only the receiving end of the research. And it means that each farmer can really come up with the research question that they need. And the research is happening on the farm in the actual environment it's intended to, and that's invaluable.
If more farmers can direct the lens of on-farm research, then we can all benefit from these practical innovations.
The Farmer-Led Research Project on our farm has taught us so much even in the first season. We can actually see the results clearly in the field. For other farmers who are looking at running a trial on their farm, I would say go for it. The support from EFAO, the rigor of the method that the EFAO will help you develop, it's just an incredible learning experience. Even if the particular experiment that you do doesn't result in something that's going to benefit your farm, the process of figuring out how to do that kind of experiment and how to do it properly is something that's going to benefit you down the road for sure.
Thanks for showing that. So I think, yeah, the one thing I would say is that participating in farmer-led research has actually led to changes in practices on my farm, and that's both been as a result of findings in my own trials, but but equally so from what I've learned from other farmers' trials and what they've shared at the symposium or the research results that I've read. So I'll take my last couple of minutes here just to talk about some challenges. And this is broken into two perspectives. So one is looking at for farmers and program staff. One of the realities is that for farmers, research season is busy season, and research can't and maybe even shouldn't always be a priority on a working farm. A second point is that finding a balance between the practical and what is practical and what is needed for robustness of the protocol and data collection can be really challenging. So a quick example, in our multi-farm lettuce variety trial, we didn't discover till the end of the season that we actually needed to be taking head counts twice a week in order to get statistically useful data to compare bolting. So, and that's the end of the season. So that's great. And you integrate that knowledge and you try again the next season and you work with what you got. So too little data collection means we don't have valid statistics, but too much data collection required can really compromise on follow through. Keeping research flexible can be a challenge. Somehow working in the ability to change things up mid-season if it's not working as expected or it's too much to keep up with. Learning to anticipate the necessary data collection details in advance can be really challenging. And again, we're farmers, we're not researchers. Sometimes we struggle to think through all of the details. So one example, my very first trial, we were looking at the results of brassicas, so broccoli that had been planted into various preparatory cover crops. And we had decided we were going to weigh the heads to figure out what the yield impact was. And I got out to the field with a knife and I realized, well, where on the neck am I going to cut this head? If I cut it high, it's going to weigh less. If I cut it low, it's going to weigh more. How is this going to be meaningful? And we had to do some, I had Sarah on the phone with a knife in my hand in the field trying to figure out how do we tweak this protocol so that our results are meaningful. So tons of learnings that way. And then finally, being okay with crop loss and the impacts of research management choices. So, putting space and effort into a trial might mean that in the short term, we lose productivity, we lose space. I did a spader trial at one point and discovered a lot about how a spader works and doesn't work, and lost sort of a quarter acre of production for a couple of years while I tried to recover from perennial weeds that moved in. So being okay with that, and also remembering that really doing things as a trial first causes a lot less of these sorts of impacts than making a management change without running a trial first. So then other challenges for program administration, so that's the next and the last, I think. Finding long-term funding to support some of the more complex or long-term trials, like multi-year trials or breeding trials, trials on perennial species where we can't get the results in one season. And then having flexible funding that allows farmers' curiosities to really drive the research focus, whether that is matched by the interests of the funders or not. And I think I have one more slide that talks a little bit about scaling up, but I'm going to save that for the panel. Maybe just to say, and a really important thing for us to acknowledge is the importance of program to program mentorship. And this is where a symposium like this is so fabulous. The EFAO's Pharma-Led research program was really mentored heavily and modeled closely on the Practical Farmers of Iowa Cooperators program. We learned so much from them. They shared so much information. And the more that we can do that sort of thing, I think the more this can be scaled up. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to the rest of the symposium.
Thank you, Angie, for your amazing presentation. I'm sure everybody has enjoyed it. We appreciate you being with us today in this webinar. Now, I'm honored to introduce you our second guest speaker, Andrew Mushita, who is the Executive Director of Community Technology Development Organization, CTDO, and is trained as an agronomist. He has a long association with rural development work. He has participated directly in a number of national, regional, and international policy dialogues focused on issues related to agricultural biodiversity, food and nutrition security, environment, international trade, farmers' rights, and the implication of IPRs on smallholder farmers. Mr. Mushita sits on a number of national, regional, and international bodies that include the National Plant Genetic Resources Committee of the Ministry of Agriculture, Biodiversity Advisory Board of the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, Board Chairperson of the Regional Agricultural and Environmental Initiatives Network for Southern and Eastern Africa. He is also a board member of the Association of Plant Breeding for the Benefit of Society based in Geneva, Switzerland. He is a board member of the Africa Seeds and African Union Initiative on the seed sector development, and he has written a number of papers, published a number of books and chapters in several books. Welcome, Andrew, and I invite you to start.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to thank Silvia for inviting me to be part of this webinar. Also, Patricia and the University of Gallup. I think I would really appreciate the invitation to participate. So can I have the, yeah, okay. So yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, my intervention, we have a very short introductory slide, and then also I'll go to the definition of Pharma-Led research, and also the principles, and maybe also looking at Pharma-Led research from the African perspective, and also looking at, what are the opportunities for farmers and how does this contribute to resilience building, and what are the new approaches to Pharma-Led research, which are very important. Then what are the institutional linkages as well, and they have a small conclusion. So next slide. Yeah, Pharma-Led research or community-led agriculture research is important for natural resource management, food and nutrition security. It is also important for ecological sustainability, economic strengthening, and community empowerment, gender equity, and also providing the opportunity for capacity building and to innovate. It is also key in terms of influencing formal sector agriculture research and development institutions. Building farmer-to-farmer information exchange networks for dissemination and technology adoption is quite central. So that is what I can say in terms of the introduction. Can I have the next slide? Now, the definition of Pharma-Led research is also about co-generation of local innovations that are new, which are also farmer-centric and are demand-driven, because the farmer has to be in the driving seat in terms of what kind of innovations and technology which they want. And farmers, together with support from other agents, collectively create an enabling policy environment that is also provides a pluralistic extension methods to whatever they would want to do. The other also definition is that it has to promote innovations that address socioeconomic, institutional development, marketing, access to finance procedures, changing gender roles, and agriculture research partnership arrangements. It should also facilitate institutional change that embrace learning from farmers as equals, because what we have seen over the years is that there's a top-down approach, and I think farmers can be at the center, and that they should be respected. There should be mutual kind of respect between the two. It should be premised on investigating possible ways to improve livelihoods of local people and communities in the agriculture and natural resource management sector. Next slide. Yeah, okay. In terms of the broad key principles, it should be inclusive. It should be actually the principle of inclusiveness and participatory consultative processes should be very important in building the farmer-led agriculture research. It should support farm experimentation and capacity building. It should promote participatory technology development, and it has to thrive on interconnectedness. It should also build resilience. It should build the healthfulness of community. It should prioritize diversity of ideas and practices. It should value agriculture, ecological, cultural heritage. It enhances social justice and equity. Next slide. From the African context, I think Pharma-Led research evolved through a complex farming systems approach, because I think in the African continent, the ecology changes so much, maybe even between every 10 kilometers or 20 or so, depending on where you are, the ecology changes. So it has to relate to a farming system which is quite complex. It also manifested into indigenous knowledge systems to improve farm productivity and agriculture research. As a result, indigenous knowledge systems are not documented formally, but preserved through secrets or public domain. No literature is shared. So it is handed over from generation to generation, from the older generation to the young generation, so that then people can adopt and adapt what they learn from their fathers and mothers. The success of farmer-led research depends on information transfer channels, farmer-to-farmer extension, and informal networks. These are key kind of elements which really drives the farmer-led research. Farmers find it much easier to learn from each other, and they need also to have their kind of networks, which becomes the key channels for information and technology transfer. This leads towards community-led processes of research, agriculture development, and natural resource management. Such research and development is driven and co-managed by smallholder farmers or by farmers themselves. If it becomes a top-down approach, then technology adoption becomes a challenge. Public and private sector research institutions need to partner with farmers to tap into the indigenous knowledge systems and conduct on-farm trials where farmers set the research agenda. So it is very key that the agenda is driven by farmers, because they know what they want and they are in a better situation to have an appreciation of what their soils are, the rainfall which they have, the kind of pest and disease, etc. And farmers are very informative about these issues, so hence they need to be in the driving seat and at the forefront. Next slide. What are the opportunities? I think once the research is farmer-led, the adoption of crops and technologies appropriate to their needs, ecology, holistic, and understanding of their farms is much faster and much better. This then translates into issues, problems, policies, and research findings to the farm level. It achieves also greater food and nutrition security through a higher and more sustainable yield, crop diversification, and food preservation. And access to more agrobiodiversity that contributes to greater resilience to environmental risks and pests and diseases is actually realized. It adapts to various types of locally appropriate innovations and adaptation being scaled up. So you have more technology adoption, which is really driven by farmers because they know what opportunities there are. It also provides an opportunity to sharing of data and learning experiences as opposed to competition, which tends to generate a culture of knowledge hoarding, particularly from the formal sector research institutions. Farmers find joy in sharing their results of research, whilst the formal sector research system really try to privatize the results of agriculture, largely because they want to profit out of those kind of research results. So we find that farmer-led research scales up knowledge and shares knowledge, innovations, and technologies freely and without any restrictions, and they celebrate their success much more than the opposite. Next slide. Resilience building opportunities. I think here it is important to also highlight that participatory action research and experimentation is actually a key component of farmer-led research. Agroecological farming practices also is quite a very important opportunity for resilience building. Implementing smart agriculture strategies for resilience building, soil conservation strategies. It also addresses, there are also opportunities for addressing social, economic, policy dynamics that shape food and nutrition. Indigenous knowledge also is valued and then incorporated as part of the research, and farmer capacity building to innovate is appreciated. And conservation agriculture methods is another good opportunity. Crop and livestock integration, agroforestry practices are also taken on board. Water harvesting techniques are also appreciated. So there's a wide range of opportunities where you get farmers really adopting or utilizing some of these resilient building opportunities in farmer-led research. Next slide. Some of the approaches here are decentralization of innovation processes rather than having all these done at research stations, which everything is centralized. So in farmer-led research, most of the research is decentralized to various regions, and maybe they also undertake kind of location-specific research. So that decentralization gives you a broader kind of results, which are also location specific, and this is quite key and important. Decrease dependence on few centralized actors. I think instead of just depending on few researchers or research institutions, you then tend to have more players coming on board and then coming up with more results. So research is actually driven by the beneficiaries. And there's also need to create for the creation of broad involvement of a range of stakeholders. They can be farmers, they can be researchers, they can be policymakers, etc. They then come together and really work together as a team. So that multi-stakeholder kind of involvement is very key to promote farmer-led research. Next slide. Here I'm just showcasing some of the institutional linkages which are important in this case. You need the national gene banks to be working with the farmers to provide some of the advanced in segregating materials to the farmers. The regional gene banks also has a key role to play. The international agriculture research centers can also provide a lot of material to the farmers for on-farm testing, or participatory plant breeding, participatory variety testing, and participatory variety enhancement can be done. There's need to have development partners in private sector also to come on board. Of course, at the moment, private sector is not really, in some cases, not forthcoming, but they should be encouraged to be part of this process so that they can also learn from the farmers and that their technologies are driven by the demands and needs of the farmers. Community seed banks are very key as they are repositories of all the germplasm which occur in the community. The local leadership and communities are very important. The agriculture extension also is quite key, and national crop improvement programs, policymakers and universities should all come on board to support and work together with the farmers as farmer-led research is promoted. Next slide. Farmer-led research will be context-specific, and success and potential will be influenced by many factors. So it's not something we can say, there's one kind of blueprint, but it is context-specific, and also the needs vary from country to country, so we need to be aware of that. The key factors for success will be to adopt local geographical setting and allow for participatory development of the research agenda so that the farmers set the agenda which they would want to address. And finally, farmer-led research, when scaled up, will result in increased food productivity as they will be setting the agenda of what they would want to produce. And as at the end of the day, they commit themselves to adopt whatever technologies which are developed with them and not without them. So that is very key and important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. We appreciate you being with us today in this webinar. Your presentation was awesome.
Thank you.
Dear friends and colleagues, before we move to the next section of the webinar, we are going to have a 5-minute break. I hope you have enjoyed our webinar until now, so see you soon in 5 minutes.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you're all able to stretch your legs, get outside for a minute. I don't know what it's like everywhere that everyone else is, but here in Guelph, it's beautiful. It seems like spring is already on its way. I just wanted to take the time to thank all of our two key speakers. At this point, we're going to now move into a panel discussion. So alongside our key speakers today, we have 3 other panelists that's going to join our discussion today. I'm just going to take a moment to introduce them. So our first speaker is Dr. Gloria Otieno. She's joining us from Uganda. Gloria is a genetic resources and food security policy specialist working with the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT since 2012. She is currently working at the African Kampala office. Her main areas of work include working with farmers to develop resilient seed systems for climate change adaptation and community seed banking and policy support for integrated seed systems. She also works with national partners on the implementation of the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture and Access and Benefit Sharing under the Nagoya Protocol. She holds a PhD in Development Economics from the International Institute of Social Studies of the Erasmus University of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and a Master's in Agricultural Development from Ghent University in Belgium. Welcome, Gloria. Our second speaker today is Chesha Wettasinha, joining us from the Netherlands. Chesha is a Sri Lankan Dutch tropical agriculturalist with more than 35 years of experience in international development, mainly related to sustainable agriculture and natural resource management. She has worked in many countries in Asia and Africa and has been engaged in pioneering work related to farmer-led innovation development and agroecology. She is currently she is a senior member of the international support team for ProLinova, an international community of practice promoting local innovation and ecologically oriented agriculture and natural resource management. Chesha also serves as an advisor in inclusive food systems at the Royal Tropical Institute in Amsterdam. And she's born and raised among smallholder farming communities in Sri Lanka, so she has an intimate understanding of the needs, challenges, and aspirations of smallholder farmers, and is committed to creating agriculture research, extension, and education systems that are supportive of them. Welcome, Chesha. And our third speaker today is Dr. Martin Entz, who is joining us from Manitoba in Canada. Martin is a professor of cropping systems and natural systems agriculture in the Department of Plant Science at the University of Manitoba. The program's goal is to discover new ways of farming ecologically and to empower farmers with knowledge and other tools required to design organic farming systems adapted to where farmers live. Farmers are active partners in many of the graduate students' projects that he works with. He received his PhD from the University of Saskatchewan and worked as a farm manager and research agronomist before embarking on his academic career. He leads the Glenlee Long-Term Rotation Study, which is Canada's oldest organic versus conventional farming systems experiment, and just completed its 28th season. And since 2011, Martin has been involved in the Canadian organic farmers directly in development of crop varieties for organic production. And this has been in partnership with USC Canada and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. He also has led projects in Central America, Zimbabwe, East Africa, and North Korea. Welcome, Martin. So just before we start our panel discussion, I just wanted to mention that we will be taking questions after the discussion. We'll be having a question and answer period. So please feel free to enter any questions you have into the chat box, and we'll take a look at those after. So for our panel discussion, we're going to have 3 rounds in which the panelists will be invited to share their experiences, thoughts, and insights on the topic. So for our first question, now that we've heard from our 2 keynotes on a little bit of what farmer-led research means to them, we want to open up this question to our other panelists to get a bit of a perspective on what farmer-led research means from a scientist, academic, and international development perspective, and how this is significant to them. So I'll open it up to our 3, to Gloria, Chesha, and Martin to talk about this. Perhaps Gloria would like to start on this topic.
Yes, thank you very much, Brittany, and thank you very much, everybody, for coming to this webinar. I would like also to thank the speakers before, Andrew and Angie, for a very well discussed topic, a very well illuminated topic. And I'd just like to share a little bit about experiences from the developing world. I work in Uganda, I've worked in Zimbabwe as well with Andrew. I've worked in a couple of countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, and mostly on farmer-led research. So one thing I'd like to highlight is the fact that climate is changing. And with climate changing, farmers are facing more serious problems in terms of adapting to climate change, and also in terms of sustainable agriculture. We are losing soil fertility, as well as facing a lot of pests and diseases that need us to use a lot of chemicals, and this is also destroying the environment. So any form of sustainable agriculture that minimizes the use of chemicals and really helps us to conserve the environment and conserve also the fauna and flora, especially the bees, is really important for us in this part of the world. So what I've been doing mostly is working with farmers to find seeds that are adapted to climate change using low input farming. So minimal fertilizer use, minimal chemical use from spraying for pesticides and for diseases. So we do this through participatory varietal testing and evaluation, and we source our materials, our germplasm, from everywhere. We can get seeds from other farmers in different communities within the same countries, or we can share also across countries. But we also do rely a lot on gene banks, where the gene banks provide us with materials, collections that were done many years back, and we bring this to the farmers, and we engage the farmers in testing them in their farms under their own farming conditions. So what we do is we use crowdsourcing methodology. We give farmers a couple of seeds, so 3 seeds, different types of varieties, let's say of beans per farmer, and we give them to test, and they report back to us on different traits that are important for them. For example, early maturity, drought tolerance, or flood resistance, or yields, also pest and disease resistance. So after getting that information, we compile it and we help the farmers to select the best varieties for adaptation. But we also share this information with breeding programs. So we work with national breeding programs as our partners. Andrew mentioned a lot on the issue of partnerships. So national breeding programs are our main partners in disseminating such kind of information, because they take some of these varieties that farmers have selected and they improve on them, and they bring them back to the farmers to again do participatory variety testing and selection. And during this whole process, we engage farmers as equals. Farmers have a lot of knowledge, and that indigenous knowledge is very important, especially how they apply it in terms of adapting to climate change. the kinds of farming practices that they will apply in order to adapt to climate change. For example, in a dry season, they will practice early planting, or there is some forms of irrigation that they use, which are were traditionally done from indigenous knowledge, and they still work up to now, so they have not abandoned them. So we combine all this knowledge, and we also give them technical support, and we help to collect the data to find the best and the most optimum ways in which farmers can adapt to climate change. At the same time, we also engage policymakers, because some of these farmers' varieties actually do outperform some of the varieties that are in the market in terms of maybe pest and disease or drought tolerance or some other traits. So we engage the policymakers to see that some of these varieties are actually commercialized. And this is where the policy issues come in terms of developing integrated seed systems that take cognizance of the challenges of the farmer seed systems, but also take cognizance of the contribution of farmers to this knowledge and to these seeds and to their conservation and to their sustainable use, and also take cognizance of the contribution of breeding to these farmers, to these farming systems. So we engage with seed policymakers to ensure that there is ways in which farmer seeds can be recognized through registration or through alternative listing. And then we also engage with them to ensure that farmers can produce seed, their own quality declared seed, which is not 100% distinct, uniform, or stable, or 99% DUS as is required in breeding practices. So we relaxed the DUS for the farmers so that they are able to still use seed that is responding to climate change, but at the same time meeting their nutrition and production needs. Then we also engage a lot with women, because women are the ones that are responsible for household food security. So by engaging women, we try to ensure that the seed systems are diverse enough to provide food, but also to provide nutrition, because there are a lot of challenges with regards to protein, energy malnutrition, or vitamin deficiencies that can be actually solved by engaging with farmers on what they eat, how they eat, what is the basket of food that they have. Because here, a lot of farmers don't do monocropping. They will do vegetables, they will do sweet potatoes for the starch, they will do maize, they will do beans for the proteins. So we engage with women farmers to ensure that what they are eating at the household and what they are growing also at the household level is helping us to meet their nutritional needs. And they also have a lot of indigenous knowledge, which they contribute with respect to which vegetables to grow during which season, which vegetables provide optimal nutrition for breastfeeding mothers, which kind of vegetables are good for weaning. So this kind of indigenous knowledge is also very important for us to help us to design certain interventions that can help us achieve sustainable development goals of zero poverty, health and well-being, and also incomes for the farmers. So basically that's what I do. And besides that, we also do a lot of conservation through community seed banking. Because of the nature of the farmers here, smallholders may not have access to improved varieties because of, they require to be bought every season. So we encourage them to use community seed banks where seeds are conserved, where they can borrow the seeds and return the seeds. It's like a bank. So you borrow and you return double the amount which you borrowed, so that other farmers can also benefit from the seed. And we also encourage them to conserve the indigenous varieties, because they have specific traits that can also contribute to breeding, that can also contribute to the development of new varieties through the formal breeding programs. So that is what I would like to share from me. Let me not take the whole time and leave for the rest of the panel to also share. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Gloria. That was very informative. And thank you for highlighting the importance of farmer-led research on institutional and policy change. How about we turn things over to Martin and hear a little bit about his experiences and thoughts from a Canadian context.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Martin Entz. I'm in Winnipeg. I'm in Treaty 1 territory, right in the center of Canada, longitudinally anyways. So I'm at a university, and so I've really enjoyed listening to Andrew, Angie, and Gloria speak from their perspective. What has true confessions, I've always been a little bit uncomfortable with the type of power that universities wield. And so when I started my position at the University of Manitoba, I was interested in listening to farmers. I come from an agrarian background. My area of responsibility was ecological agriculture. And it became pretty obvious to me that a sort of a centrally planned university top-down model was not going to work, because the knowledge was indeed in the farming community. Much of the knowledge was in the farming community. So I'm very grateful for having had that opportunity to be challenged by this notion of ecological agriculture, which I have now been able to work in for several decades. And I also want to thank those people who helped me along the way, who, the funders who believed in this type of research paradigm. Because certainly in the Canadian context, and maybe it's the same in other places like the US and Europe, and is that the funding for universities is really wanting to support a top-down model. So there was a shift there in power that I think that has been really exciting to work in. So I had sort of listed, who, what, where, how, when. And so let me go through a little bit of that and talk a little bit about how. When I look at farmer-led research, I think about, the farmer-led research is over here, and what are the major sort of drivers and influences in my experience? One has been the industry, and the other has been sort of the goals of society, which I'm going to just call agroecology. And I have seen some farmer-led research in a very industrial agricultural model. A lot of the no-till work started out as really farmer-led research. There weren't any research institutions doing the work 40 years ago. It was all happening on farms. So I think we want to acknowledge that was important. If I think back to those meetings where there were lots of farmers talking about their experiences, it was mostly men. And it was very quickly supported by industry. So industry saw how they could get involved. And that was okay. That made a contribution. And I think that's been softened by the idea of sort of more of a conservation agriculture approach, which Andrew was working on in Zimbabwe. But I think now what I see is, if I look at that sort of farmer-led research, and you've got the industry and you've got the sort of agroecology here, I think an ecological approach has lent itself extremely well to farmer-led research for a number of reasons, like Gloria was mentioning, just thinking about seeds, just thinking about what resources are required. So my hypothesis is, from where I live in Canada, is that the nature of farmer-led research is very different, whether it's sort of an industrial or an ecological approach to agriculture. And I dare say that the ecological focused farmer-led research is richer. It allows farmers to be more involved. It honors farmers. It breaks down those power structures more quickly. And so I'd say it's more effective. So that's a little bit on my perspective on what my experience is and on what I've heard this morning. Two other quick thoughts, and then I'll end. One is who? Well, the farmers for sure, and I think farmers at the leading edge of an idea are always the most motivated. So, you know, organic farmers in Canada are really fun to work with because they're really exploring, they're challenging themselves, and we're talking about men and women. You know, I love going to farm meetings where there's a gender balance, and we didn't used to see that, but now I think that's very healthy in the community, of course. But it's been a big change in Canada. Number two, you need extension. That was mentioned by a number of people, Angie and Andrew. It's really critical, and it helps to link people together. And as far as the institutions, they can be helpful. Institutions like mine, they can be helpful if they actually listen and if they're willing to engage with farmers. And then a final thought on how. I've sat in sort of sharing circles with farmers in many different places, in Canada, in East Africa, Southern Africa, Central America, North Korea. Yes, North Korea, you know, we have sharing circles, and the context is also different. So somebody mentioned that, I think Andrew mentioned, you know, the ecology can be different 10 kilometers down the road, and it's so true. And the circumstances are so different. And I love Wes Jackson's quote. He said, all adaptation is local. So when we talk about, you know, adaptation to climate change or adaptation to anything, it's very local. And that's really important to embrace. And if we think about sort of local solutions, of course, the community, including the farmers, need to be involved in that discussion and need to be empowered. They also need to, you know, one of the things about the sharing circles that is, you know, I've tried to get as many students into them. I've tried to reorganize agricultural science courses so that we have more of a sharing circle approach, because we need to train the new generation of academics to be much more respectful of farmer-led approaches. And then, you know, we also need to listen to the rest of the community. I was really struck by the work in Malawi where, you know, local food production was increased, but actually nutritional outcomes were not because of the nature of that approach. You know, the breastfeeding rates went down because women were working in the field. You know, so it's not just about local production either, and so that involves the broader community. So I guess we're being hosted by international development. I've got the list here, rural planning and development department. So it's perfect. So those are some of my thoughts. Thanks very much, Brittany.
Thank you, Martin. That was great. That was very informative. I'm going to pass it over to Chesha now to see what you'd like to contribute.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I won't go into a long sort of talking a little bit about what everybody said, but thank you, Silvia, for inviting me. And let me try to very briefly share on behalf of the Prolinova Network, which is quite a big community of practice. At the moment, we are in 21 countries, and it's an informal network with multiple stakeholders. So we do have farmers, farm innovators, as well as people from research institutions, government agencies, non-governmental organizations, farm organizations, and a whole broad spectrum of people. Now, this community of practice came to be because of the fact that we felt that farmers were actually sidelined in the whole agricultural research and development process. And as several of the other presenters said, this whole top-down way of looking and bringing things to farmers and sort of imagining that farmers are always waiting for something from outside to be brought, that farmers don't do anything on their own. So how we look at it is we start by discovering what farmers are doing themselves to solve problems, to grab opportunities, whatever the case is, farmers are always experimenting. I mean, as Angie said in her presentation, it's something that farmers always have to do because they got to deal with the situation that they have at hand. So we, as Prolinova, we try to identify these innovations within farming communities. So it doesn't necessarily mean technological innovations. It could also be social innovations. It could be institutional innovations. So we look at it at the broad spectrum of what farmers do, what farmers innovate, and we use that as an entry point to bring other stakeholders to join farmers in a process of innovation development, as we call it. So in this process, it is the farmer who will be leading it, the farmer innovator, based on their own needs and on their own interests. And the other stakeholders are actually in a supportive role. And so it's very much a bottom-up process. And we sort of, we facilitate the process in a way that farmers are in control of what they want to do. They are interested in doing the research. It's not something that somebody from outside is doing, but we try to join the knowledge system so the farmers' knowledge together with outsiders' knowledge can improve what they are doing. And the outcome of this process is, of course, they could be practices, new management practices, new ways of organizing things, which is suited to the environment in which they live. So I know that the other presenters said that some of these products that come out of a research process are very much developed for a particular agroecological zone, for the conditions in which farmers live. So they are also adapted very easily. I think Angie said that farmers are indeed the best source to learn from for other farmers. So that is also something that happens within the Pharma-Led research process. And this process helps farmers to regain their confidence. That is what we have seen. Somehow, from being sidelined, they are brought into the center. And it's our hope that farmers will be more and more involved in making the decisions related to agriculture and also to policy making. Of course, it's a long process, but by bringing them into the conversation, by giving them the space to discuss their aspirations, we then help the entire agricultural research and development sector to look at farmers differently and put farmers also as the most important stakeholders in the whole process. So for us, it's not so much what a farmer innovates the product, but it's the process of innovation, why they do what they do and how they do it and how they get about it. And that process is very important for also building the capacity to innovate and then becoming resilient. So I think I'll leave it at that for now, because I think we don't have a lot of time.
Thank you very much, Chesha. That was very insightful. One of the main points that's been brought up through all of the discussion so far is definitely the importance of a bottom-up approach to research, as well as this idea of integrating different knowledge systems. So on that note, we have a very diverse group of participants and people listening in today. So I think one of the main questions we'd like to discuss is sort of how can we foster different relationships and collaboration among different sectors and different actors involved in farmer-led research, and how this can contribute to rural and agri-food system resiliency. So I'd like to open it up to everyone on the panel today to offer their thoughts on sort of in what ways can we foster collaboration between different sectors, so between scientists, academics, the public, the private sector, and farmers. So maybe Angie, would you like to start off?
Sure. I mean, just briefly thinking about collaboration, certainly having farmer-led research housed within an established farmer-to-farmer group. So in our case, the Ecological Farmers Association, the Practical Farmers of Iowa, but that sort of housing that is lodged in the NGO world, so can access funding that farmers can't necessarily access as for-profit businesses, and that can help with a lot of the coordination and dissemination of information is really helpful. Thinking in terms of collaborations in the academic world, I think one of the challenges there is that academic timelines are not always the same as farmer timelines. I mean, our season is different than an academic season. So developing funding mechanisms that allow academics to move more towards a farmer's timeline, I think would be important to foster more collaboration there. And then, again, in terms of some of the academic funding, being able to really uphold the value of on-farm and farmer-led research, sort of valuing that knowledge transfer, but having funding streams that allow for academics to take some of what farmers learn in on-farm trials and then test them more rigorously, so that we could have a bit of an iterative process where we're maybe generating some valid information, but in our sort of on-farm way, things can go to an academic situation to have a bit more rigorous testing. You realize things need to be played out in the field again, they come back. And I think that sort of iterative process would be very helpful. In Canada, maybe the one other thing I would mention is we have lost our extension services. Certainly in Ontario, extension services barely exist. They barely exist, even less exist in the organic sector. And so that doesn't allow for a lot of collaboration with our government sector that is supposed to be supporting farmers. And so doesn't allow for a lot of collaboration there. I'll leave it at that. I think there's lots of other perspectives.
I'll just let anyone who likes to jump in at this point.
I think let me jump in a little bit and talk about collaboration and the importance of it. First of all, as a researcher, you have your own hypothesis that you are trying to test, but you realize that when you go to the field, the farmers also have their own hypotheses actually, which they are also trying to test. So you have to collaborate with farmers in a way that their knowledge and they are comfortable with what you are doing, and this relationship is at an equal footing, so that you can be able to get very desirable results. But then again, you have to do it in a way that it's meaningful for research, that you can draw, very good, how do you say it? Very good conclusions, or very good, you can learn from not only the process, but also that the results are sound and contribute to innovations and also contribute to research. And also, being from having talked about that, in most countries where we work, there are also national organizations. They are farmer organizations, for example, where Andrew is. There are also national breeding programs that also have their own agenda. And then there is also the general policy that the country is pursuing. For example, Martin gave an example of Malawi, where Malawi was pursuing a policy of food security. And this policy made people to grow more maize and, without much, the government gave fertilizer subsidies, the government gave maize seed subsidies, and a lot of input subsidies for growing maize. But the farmers switched to maize because it was profitable, but there were other outcomes that were not taken care of. And so in the end, although they could not sleep hungry and they were, food secure, but the nutritional outcomes and other issues related to gender and agroecological systems were lost. So when you have such kind of partnerships that, take care of everybody's interests is very important for farmer-led research. So what farmers bring to the table is more important because they are the ones that take up these interventions. They are the ones that adopt and use the varieties that we produce. So their view and their contribution is very important for planning. I think that's just what I would like to contribute on that issue.
If I could just make a quick comment, I love that. And, when we look at knowledge generation, what I need to remind myself and my students is that the scientific method, which, drives our research is it begins with observation, and then you develop a hypothesis. And the problem that we have is that the power rests in institutions that actually never go out and observe what farmers are doing. And that's a problem because once you observe, you realize the rich knowledge and the interesting questions that are there. And we see this, I think, in COVID. There is a blend of scientific knowledge and common sense, which is allowing us to deal with COVID, hopefully. And we need to do more of that in agriculture. And that does not mean that doesn't mean second-rate scholarship, because some of the most interesting ideas are in the minds of the farmers and on the land. So just wanted to add that to the previous discussion.
Let me add to what Martin said. I think that's a challenge that we see, for instance, if we actually go in with using the farmers' own innovations as the entry point to farmer-led research and try to get farmer researchers, scientists, and academics and others on board, there's always this tension that the farmer researchers are not quite sometimes interested in doing this, perhaps because it's not rigorous enough according to their way of doing science. So that's, or because they can't publish this data because it's not sufficient data or the observations are not correct or so on. So I think that the way the education that people get to become agricultural professionals needs to change as well, to give sufficient recognitions to farmers as equal partners and researchers, and to come up with systems and that are simpler, that are more tailored to do farmer-led research. So you can't actually expect to sort of put the scientific way of doing it on farmers. But I think when you work with farmers, you've got to develop more creative ways, and farmers have very creative ways of doing it. So I think that sometimes is a challenge, and you need to, we got to deal with it if we really want farmers to be equal partners in the research process. And I think Angie mentioned something like that when she was talking in her presentation about the data that needs to be collected, the timelines that have to be followed. And when it's more farmer-led, it has to be done differently.
Yeah, if I could just jump in with one quick thing here too. It's not just collaboration between sectors, but within the farming sector itself. Something that is so valuable are multi-farm trials. So, where one farm may not have the capacity to do sufficient replicates to provide scientifically rigorous data, multiple farms can be packaged together to provide some of those replicates. And but that takes support. I mean, it's hard enough for one farmer to try to come up with a protocol that's going to work really well, but facilitating conversations between farmers to agree on goals, agree on priorities, agree on methodology, agree on data collection processes. That's a type of support that You know, for us, we have this Pharma-Led research program with the EFAO, but where that doesn't exist, that is something that academic or scientific communities could help provide for farmers, is some of that facilitation and development of multi-farm collaboration.
Wonderful. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for highlighting that. I just wanted to turn it over.
Can I just come in?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you.
Yeah. Okay. I think when we look at Pharma-Led research, probably what we want to do is to look at it from 3 levels: from the policymaker side, from the scientist, and from the farmer's perspective. I think for policymakers, what is critical is that they need to provide an enabling policy environment, which provides for economic empowerment for the farmers, institutional strengthening and capacity building, social capital, ownership and control, which is mostly the plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, for conservation and sustainable use, and also technological development and adaptation. So in this case, I think policymakers we need to really look at it in the context of creating an enabling policy environment, and this should include these elements, so that the policymakers can play that role, can level the kind of playing field, because by and large, there is a top-down approach in most of these Pharma-Led research. So that will level the playing field so much. From the scientists, I think what is critical is for them to accept the core generation of knowledge, innovation, and technologies as equals with farmers. The moment I think that the scientists appreciate this, then I think that will be very fine. From the farmer's perspective, it is important that they are in the driving seat in terms of agenda setting, farmer experimentation, information exchange and sharing, technology adoption and adaptation. So the farmers will be really also in the driving seat to do some of these activities. And who will be the winner? The winner will be food security and nutrition security. The winner will be also ecological sustainability and adaptation to climate change. These will be the winners. So those are the key elements who will win the day and the globe, and that will be food secure, but eating a more healthy food, not just feeding our stomach, because food is the first medicine we take.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I just wanted to move on to our third question now. Quickly, I think a really important question to ask is really about how do we scale up and out farmer-led research? So if that's within certain sectors, or if it's across a nation or internationally. I'm just wondering what everyone's thoughts are on that. How do we build collaboration for this?
Well, I want to begin with just a point, and that is that I think we need to honor what farmers do in our society. They are already very well respected. Certainly in Canadian society, farmers are among the most trustworthy citizens. Research has shown that. But we have, I'm going to quote Wes Jackson here, we have embraced a combination of speculative science and science fiction to fix our problems on the planet, that is not going to work. It's not that simple. And so biotechnology really was a manifestation of that. I have students all the time say we're going to switch this gene, and that'll just cascade throughout the food system and solve our problems. And that is what, certainly in Canada, a lot of Canadians have embraced that technological approach. And I think we need to educate ourselves and say, no, there are some common sense approaches, and a lot of those reside in the minds of farmers who are out there every day dealing with these systems. And so when we talk about innovation and knowledge generation, there's a real dividend there that comes from tapping into that farmer knowledge and formalizing it a bit more. So thank you.
Would anyone else like to comment on that?
Let me add to what Martin said. In terms of scaling up, institutionalizing or whatsoever, I think farmer-led research, I mean, there is this idea that there is always this search for some innovation, some product that can be scaled up at a global level. I mean, that is somehow how people look at it. Like it's, but we think in ProLinova that what needs to be scaled up is the process of farmer-led research, and not so much the products of farmer-led research. So if a farmer comes up with a new way of planting and it helps him to improve his farming and livelihoods, that doesn't mean that that's the thing that needs to be scaled up. But it's more about this way of how do farmers actually deal with their issues? How do they come up with solutions? How can that be supported? And that's what actually needs to be scaled up. So we, in ProLinova, we always put a lot of emphasis on the process of innovation rather than the products of innovation.
Thank you. And one of the challenges that a number of speakers have mentioned is sort of, I guess, challenge and opportunity is the scaling out of these innovations and knowledge-based, but outside of a local context. So what are the challenges involved in that in particular, transferring knowledge to different sort of contexts?
Everybody's being very quiet. I just in our I think it is happening. A number of people have indicated that extension services have really diminished, and I think one of the ways that I think we can look to to scale up is to reinstate some of that. Some people within the food system who are connecting the dots, and those are the extension workers. They may be different models than in the past. Just give you one quick example. In our work, we implemented an organic agronomist training program across the 3 prairie provinces and in northern British Columbia, northern BC Peace agricultural region. We ran that for about 4 years, and it was really interesting to, we connected about 250 professional agronomists, and over the life of the project, initially we had a real difficult time getting buy-in from the mainstream agronomy advisors, and by the end of the program, they were quite enthusiastic partners. And we always had farmers at the center of the storytelling. And so I think there is an appetite for engaging farmers in the process. And but of course it needs support. It needs support, like other people have said. I love the idea that we're going to scale up the process and not just the products. I really like that. So I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you. I wish we had a lot more time for the discussion, but we are running out of time, and I want to open things up to make sure that we hear a few questions from the audience at this point. So I'm going to turn things over to Anab, who's going to let us to give us a couple of questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much to all the speakers for such an amazing discussion. We have a lot of great questions coming in from the audience. So the first question is from Helen Hambley. And the question is, do you purposely use any information and communication technologies in farmer-led research processes, for example, mobile devices, specific apps to exchange information, experience, digital data, repositories, and did you find any especially useful?
Anyone who likes to respond can just jump in if they want. This one.
Yeah, actually, let me respond to that. Some of our work we've done actually involved the use of mobile apps. So there's an app called CleanMob app, which is used for crowdsourcing and testing of a wide range of diversity with farmers. And the farmers basically give you feedback by phone. They can text you their responses to specific questions, 5 or 6 simple questions that farmers can understand and can respond to by mobile phone, so that you as the researcher don't have to have high transaction costs of collecting the data by paper or Word or phoning and all that. So it's a text-based thing where farmers just send their response. Thank you.
Yeah, I can also add a bit on that. I think we have information technology for agriculture development, which is an AgriShare kind of platform where farmers actually post their questions and link with extensionists and link with researchers, but also use that platform to exchange information and knowledge between and among themselves. So it could be about the weather, it could be about pests and diseases, it could be about how they mobilize their kind of resources to link with the markets. So there is, we have 2 platforms where farmers actually link via mobile app to share information and exchange also knowledge and link with markets.
And in Canada, Twitter is the language of certainly young farmers, all farmers. It's absolutely amazing how much good information gets shared on Twitter. And it overcomes the distances that we experience here, especially in the prairie region. So I love the idea of those platforms.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. I think we have time for one more question, if we do it pretty quickly before we have a couple of closing remarks.
All right, so there's another question from Francois Stepman, and it's for Gloria. And the question is Pharma-Led research more effective in promoting research on agroecological farming practices?
Yes, I think, in my opinion, Pharma-Led research is more effective because of the fact that you are also applying the farmer's knowledge in various agroecological practices that they've been doing before. So from indigenous knowledge that is passed down through generations, some of that indigenous knowledge is mostly on various agroecological practices and how to cope with the changes in climate, changes in pests and diseases, changes in farming systems. And I think building up on farmers' knowledge and is very important to design very good agroecological practices so that the farmers are able to relate to those practices, but they are also able to adapt them more quickly and maybe improve on them, rather than just introducing new practices and then the farmers are grappling with how to adapt. Then you have to spend a lot of time training the farmers and so on and so forth. So I always find that building on farmers' knowledge has been very useful. And I will give one example on using indigenous knowledge to predict the way a season is going to be. Farmers in this part of the world can tell if a season is going to be hot or how much rain there is going to be in a certain season. So they plant their crops accordingly and they apply agroecological practices accordingly, such as mulching and so on. So sometimes we build up on such practices and such knowledge in order to effectively design good practices. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And if anyone else has anything to add to that, it's a very important discussion point.
Yeah, I'd like to make one point. I agree with that. And I think this is actually where scientists can really play a role in not bringing a new product to the farm, but helping farmers understand what is happening in their farming system. So was just looking at soil microbiology or microbiology in the agroecosystem. We've learned so much more about how beneficial fungi play a role in nutrient transfer, in water lifting, and all these things. And I think that's also where the exciting research is if you go and partner with farmers who are doing something innovative, and then using your scientific tools, which the farmers don't have, that's not what they do. You can actually, get down a few layers and try to explain to yourself why this thing is functioning, and that enriches the system. It's good to know why things function, because then we can maybe come up with a more durable solution.
Yeah, and just to add quickly to what Gloria and Martin have both said, one of the reasons that Pharma-Led research is particularly important in an agroecological context is, at least in Canada, there is such a dearth of research being done in that context. So while conventional farmers may have access, it may not be their own Pharma-Led research information, which would be wonderful for them as well. But they do have access to all sorts of other research that is happening at a government and private and academic sector level. There's not nearly so much of that in existence for agroecological farmers. So if we don't generate our own, we don't have a lot to go on.
And let me just add to that, because when Angie presented, she mentioned something about them in Canada, that farmer researchers do get funds. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we have had with small-scale farmers in the Global South, that much of the research funds go to the formal researchers, and there's nowhere that farmer researchers can actually get funds. So in Prolinova, we have experimented with what we call local innovation support funds, which are small-scale research funds that are managed at community level. So if you talk about scaling up approaches, then more support for farmers to be involved in farmer-led research, to cover their risks and so on, would be very useful.
Thank you. And I'll just pass it over to Andrew if you have any final comments on this topic.
Thank you very much. I think this has been very useful and informative, and I think I would like to just say that there's need to continuously have a kind of more broad discussion and see how this farmer-led research could be really profiled and its visibility at the global level or in all different continents as another more sustainable way of undertaking agriculture research, which is participatory, inclusive, and also results with more sustainable agriculture practices based on farming systems. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. I wish we had more time to answer a few more of the audience's questions. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Patricia, who's going to give a short summary of some of the key points that we've discussed and learned today, and a few closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brittany. And what a wonderful
panel discussion we've had. I certainly agree. I wish we had a lot more time so that we could hear more from the wonderful expertise of all of our amazing panelists. So thank you so much for such an engaging and informative discussion today. I'm just going to, in our few remaining minutes here, share some final thoughts and a summary of our discussion today, kind of a high-level summary of thoughts around farmer-led research. So as we've seen and heard from the speakers today, farmer-led research is defined quite differently given the context. Because of the diverse contexts and situations, the farmer is really at the center and leading that through their own conditions and whatever the context may be. So there's a great deal of diversity when it comes to farmer-led research. Farmer-led research promotes collaboration and partnerships, not only between institutions, farmers, practitioners, and researchers, but also between farmers themselves. It's something important to keep in mind of all the different partnerships and collaborations that may exist as a result of farmer-led research initiatives. Farmer-led research also values and integrates different knowledge systems, as we've heard quite extensively from our speakers today, and is really a bottom-up approach to research, to democratize the approach to research and really honor and value different knowledges. And lastly, farmer-led research has a potential to contribute to the transformation of gender roles and really challenging that power dynamic in communities, and can be a very powerful tool in that sense. So on behalf of the team here today, I think that I would really love to thank all of our amazing guest speakers, to Angie, Andrew, Gloria, Chesha, and Martin. Thank you so much for your contributions today, for your insight, for bringing your expertise and wonderful insights about the topic of farmer-led research. I can say that it's been an absolutely informative experience for us, and it's been a real privilege to have you with us here today. I'd also like to acknowledge the contributions of the student team and Dr. Silvia Sarapura-Escobar, who has really been taking the leadership role in leading us in this event. It was through her incredible vision and support that this event was made possible. And along with her, our amazing student team, Benaz, Brittany, Daruv, and Anab, who from the planning to the development of this idea, to the communications, outreach, and design of the promotional materials. It has been an absolutely wonderful experience to work with you, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without you. Thank you to Sampurna, who has been helping us on the back end with the Zoom today, and also to acknowledge the support from the OAC Learning Trust. And lastly, on behalf of the team here, I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. Whether this is your first time hearing about farmer-led research and you're just interested to learn more, or if it's something that you've been working with for a very long time, we hope you've taken away something new and learned something from the discussion today. And we hope that we can carry forward this discussion about farmer-led research. We hope to do more of these sort of educational, informative sessions. So please do stay tuned for that in future. This concludes our webinar for today. Thank you very much, and we wish you all a very pleasant weekend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.